Yeah, welcome to another episode of Arts Place Live, number 78. That's what it says on the banner down below. We've got a great show today. We've got a special guest today. He is the host of his own show on KNUS Radio here in Denver, Colorado. It is the other blowtorch of the Rockies, another 50,000 watt radio station. So we got a great show. Lloyd's here. Everybody's all set to go. So we're going to be talking about mostly the upcoming election, predictions, and all that sort of neat stuff. So let me bring on my co-host, Lloyd Mendenhall. Hey, Lloyd. Can't hear you. Now what you do? Oh, it might work if I unmute you.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah. I looked down and saw it was muted, and I thought, okay, I didn't do that. Yeah. So anyways, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. No trick-or-treaters here since I live in an apartment where all the doors are inside the building, where you have to enter a main door to get to all the different apartments. So we don't get trick-or-treaters here, which is good. Save a lot of candy. Otherwise,
yeah, that's it.
I get empty my junk drawer and get all the condiments out. And Kim,
is that what you give away?
Soy
sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was glad we didn't have any either, because all that candy I bought was left over for me now. And because other than my grandkids, and when they come around, I've got to be nice to them because they're blood.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them little leeches, they can go beg from somebody else. I don't want them bothering me and getting on my lawn, and
your candy is left over from 1968, isn't it?
But probably, I'd probably go back further than that, probably about 1964.
Yeah, you got the Mike and Ike and all that.
Yeah, I still have a little bit of some Barry Goldwater taffy.
Oh, cool. My favorite thing is, how they make those candy apples?
Yeah.
Well, instead of apples, I use onions.
Ooh, I bet the kids just love those.
They love that.
Yeah.
So let's get this party started. Let's welcome our first guest. I gotta give him the special voice here. All the way from Aurora, Illinois, not Aurora, Illinois, Aurora, Colorado. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Let's welcome Jimmy Sengenberger. And I gotta unmute you.
Thank you.
There we go.
That was an incredible introduction, Art. Thank you.
Yeah, you can tell I do listen to your show, so I memorized your intro from your show.
Well, I appreciate it. We go back a lot of years now. I think we go back somewhere around 11, 12 years, something like that. It's been a long time.
Something like that. I think we either met at the Arapahoe County Republican Men's Club or one of the Tea Party rallies back in the day.
Yep, that sounds exactly right to me. And boy, has it been a long ride, and has Colorado politics, let alone national politics, changed a lot since then.
Yes, it has. Let's just say we've seen a lot of governors' race just go right into the toilet. Starting with Dan Mays.
Oh
boy!
I don't even want to hear that name. Yeah, it's true. We've had this long trajectory downward in Colorado, and we'll see what happens Tuesday. I'm hopeful. It's hard, but I'm hopeful that Cory Gardner can pull it out. But I'm not optimistic that Trump will secure Colorado. I just don't think he's going to win it.
I don't think so either. Now, he did really do really well in Pueblo. last time around. Now, if he could just get either Jeffco or Arapahoe County, I think he could win Colorado. If he could get one of those two, then he could do pretty well.
We'll see what happens on Tuesday. Colorado's a very fickle state. I haven't written it off yet, but it's not a great place for Republicans right now, regardless.
No, it isn't. With the influx of people coming in from all over the country, because we do have one of the best economies in the country up until last March, when the pandemic hit and kind of put us in a bad spot. But the one thing that Polis has done, he wasn't as radical about it like the other governors, like in Michigan and Nevada was.
It's interesting that you say that, Art, because I think the bar is so low for that that it's not hard for Jared Polis to clear that bar relative to Gretchen Whitmer or Andrew Cuomo in Michigan and New York, respectively, for example. Okay, fine, you can say Polis has done a better job, but again, that's a very low bar to cross. And I would say that Polis is still, like, his unilateralism, this idea that as an all-knowing, all-powerful governor, I can decree from on high, King Jared hereby decrees X, Y, and Z, and then the state legislature doesn't lift a finger to stop him, or very few voices cry out in the legislature. We need to maybe make some laws about this and not just let the governor decide unilaterally to take all of these steps. Unfortunately, the legislature didn't do that, and Governor Polis continues to assume, I think, more and more authority in his own hands. And I don't like it.
Yeah, because I think he wants to be president. That's why he ran for governor. This is another stepping stone to become president. And speaking of former governors trying to become president, who are now running for the Senate, who told everybody that he doesn't want to be a senator.
He's not cut out for
it. He doesn't have the wherewithal or the tools needed. Now he's running for Senate. We're talking about former Governor John Hickenlooper.
Yeah, John Hickenlooper. Look, I predicted in October of 2018 that John Hickenlooper would run for president, drop out, and run for the United States Senate. And I thought that his strategy was, I'm going to put myself onto the national stage, and that way I can be up against all these other presidential candidates, and I can get national attention and start building up a fundraising base so I can be more effective in running for United States Senate. I don't think he's delusional enough, or at least he wasn't in the beginning of the presidential campaign, delusional enough to say, I can actually become president and get the nomination in this current Democratic Party. I didn't think he had any inclinations toward actually winning. I thought it was a strategy to help him be successful in the United States Senate. And so that's why, literally, it's on tape. October of 2018, I said, watch it, folks. Yep. John Hickenlooper will run for president. He'll drop out and run for Senate, and it's all strategy. I don't think he ran for president, realized that there wasn't a path, and then decided, heck, I'm going to go for Senate. The big question, though, is why he did say during the presidential campaign, I'm not cut out to be a senator. That's not meant for me. I'm not good for that. Those kinds of things. And I think maybe along the way, he was trying too hard to keep people off the scent, to throw them off and make them think, oh, no, he's serious for president. He's not really going to run for United States Senate. And I think he went a little too far in that regard. And that's why he said some of those really dumb things that have been biting him ever since.
Probably a form of false humility. Like, I'm running for this, but I'm really not cut out to be a senator. But, and then now he's coming out, well, the state needs me. I need to represent Colorado better. So in spite of the fact I'm not cut out for it, he's trying to be a reverse Donald Trump. In other words, Trump came out, they didn't know if he's running or not. But the difference is Trump actually gave up a lot and did a lot to help this country. and has done so much for it, in my opinion. And these senators, we've had it here in Oklahoma, and I know this is a Colorado-based show, but I grew up in Denver, so
excellent.
Back in the back when back when Colorado was a conservative state,
Yeah.
And it's just such a nightmare now to even hear about it.
Well, I'll even say when I first got involved in politics, really in high school, this was the mid 2000s to late 2000s period. Colorado, it was a lot more of a red state than it is now. We had all these statewide offices, at least, maybe not governor, but other statewide offices that were held by Republicans. We had one or two U.S. senators who were Republicans on a consistent basis. And of course, the state legislature ebbed and flowed. It wasn't really until 2010 that we started to see, even though that year we had a pretty good election in terms of what was it that we gained in 2010? The state house. The state house. Yeah. That was the opportunity for pickup for Colorado Republicans. But after that election cycle, things just went downhill in terms of the state legislature. And but I still remember when the Arapahoe County Republican Men's Club was attended by over 100 people every single weekend. It was a weekly breakfast. Arapahoe County was solid red. And then, boom, things start going downhill, and it's very unfortunate.
Yep. Yeah. And what are your thoughts about RMGO's involvement in kind of driving people away from the party?
Well, I haven't seen as much from RMGO in recent months. I do think that there is some political involvement on their part that can be negative. For example, say what you will about his politics, certainly post-legislature. I didn't like when RMGO went after Cole Wist in the Republican primary in, 2018, that time period. That was unfortunate to me. I thought that was wrong. So I think that there's been some negativity in that regard, but I haven't really paid attention enough in the past this year to what RMGO has been doing. I know that Dudley Brown seems to be out of the picture, so... Yeah. We'll see where it goes from here.
That's because all the folks that they put up running for state legislature, state senate, they all lost. And that's when Dudley Brown stepped down. But they put up some really wacky candidates like Gordon Klingenschmidt, the former chaplain that he was a state rep for one term, to where he made some really terrible comments on his YouTube channel, because he's got a ministry on YouTube, and he made some comments about that poor woman that was killed when she was at that Craigslist site. She was looking for baby things, and they basically killed her and, opened her up and took her baby. And the baby,
I remember that,
sadly passed away. He made some really awful comments.
When did he run? He didn't run didn't he run back in 2016, 2014? Hasn't it been
something like
several years before he ran? So, I mean, I don't know. I think that RMGO right now is sort of by the wayside. I certainly don't see them putting up a number of candidates this election cycle. I am rather fond of most of the Republicans, at least that I know of, who are running in the state legislature in 2020. And that's what we got to be focused on. Right now, I think, Art and Lloyd, is 2020 and the need to expand in Colorado, for example, to expand the Republican reach in the state as far as the legislature, but also across the country to affirm not just President Trump's reelection, but also that the United States Senate stays in Republican hands. The choice couldn't be more crystal clear in my view than it has become over just the past couple of weeks alone, especially with the successful appointment of Amy Coney Barrett as a justice on the Supreme Court. That was incredible.
Right.
Yeah, that was such a great move, and they're gonna stack the courts if Biden gets in, and this is the most important election I think that I've ever watched in my lifetime, and I've been I remember when Goldwater ran, So my election, my interest in elections go all the way back to Barry Goldwater, and well, for that matter, I remember I was young, but I remember when Kennedy ran, John Kennedy, so I've and the Democrats of today, actually, I think are a shame compared to what Kennedy was. I mean, John Kennedy was still, they were liberals, but not to the extent that they're far more. He was far more conservative. What these leftist liberals that we've got running now. Matter of fact, he was anti-Castro. He was just know your. That's the problem. They don't teach history either. So these new young people don't understand history of how it's changed. So this is a very important election, and fortunately, I live in Oklahoma, and we were the only state that carried every district as red for Donald Trump. So,
speaking of Barry Goldwater, just wanted to do a shout out that if you're watching this and you have not read Conscience of a Conservative in your life yet, make sure you read that, because that is a tremendous classic treatise written by Barry Goldwater.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts about Boebert beating Tipton in primary? She is quite a pistol.
Yeah, she is definitely bringing it in terms of this race. I have always been struck by how passionate Lauren Boebert is, how engaged and energetic. I think that's something we need in the United States Congress. And so I'm looking forward to a third district victory by Lauren Boebert. I got to say, I think it is ridiculous that the media has successfully painted her as like some sort of QAnon candidate. I saw the clip of that interview. She did not endorse QAnon at all. It wasn't her saying, I'm a QAnon supportive candidate. So that's just nonsense. I think Lauren Boebert is likely to win in the third CD this coming Tuesday, and I definitely think that she should be without any doubt. I mean, ever since that first time when she went and challenged Beto, the psychedelic warlord O'Rourke, and said, hell no, you won't take our guns. Yeah. I was just like, yeah, there's something she's going to be bringing. And then she decided to go into Congress. And I thought that it was incredible that she made that jump within just a matter of months, and well earned, I think. I mean, if you defeat an incumbent like Scott Tipton, that's not an easy feat.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's
especially
true.
for a newcomer. And we're aware of her here in Oklahoma. We've been watching that race very closely. Of course, we're constitutional carry state, and very proud of that. But as I said, I grew up in Denver, so I keep it. I still got family that live there and live in Grand Junction. I have a son and whole slew of grandkids that live in Grand Junction, which is where I ended up moving after I was 15, and that's when I entered the service when I was 18. It was from Grand Junction. 2 different states back in the day. This is back in the late 60s, early 70s. It was like 2 complete different states back then. I don't know what it's like now. I haven't been back since 1990.
Well, thank you for your service, Lloyd.
Oh, it was, well, what my family did. We've done it since the revolution. So it's just part of who we are.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was, Colorado was a different thing, but we've been keeping an eye on that young lady running for Congress, and I hope she wins, because I think I've been watching her since she's the one that has the restaurant where all the ladies.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That I was about 99% sure, but I'm a little
Shooter's
old.
Grill. That's the name.
Shooter's Grill. Yeah. I'd love to go to that place. If I ever get back to Colorado, I'm going to make it a point to stop there.
Yeah. Coincidentally, isn't it in Rifle, Colorado? Isn't that where the restaurant is?
Yeah.
So it's very fitting. Shooter's Grill in Rifle, Colorado will be the home of the next congresswoman for the 3rd Congressional District, who took on Beto, the psychedelic warlord O'Rourke, when he came to Aurora, Colorado last year. By the way, just a reminder that I'm not just calling Beto the psychedelic warlord O'Rourke, the psychedelic warlord, because I feel like it. He called himself that. That was his nickname online at one point. So, if he wants to call himself the psychedelic warlord, I will gladly throw it back at him.
Yeah, that guy's he just sends cold chills up my spine. I hate to sound old, but I wished we had
because
a little bit of the Well, I am old. That's true. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I have kids that are probably older than you, Jimmy. That's for sure.
There's a good probability about that one. I'll give you that, Lloyd.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but, I'm glad to see young people that are conservatives. It's just, coming from I've been conservative all my life, as long as I can remember. I've been interested in politics and conservatism, so I was really glad to see the young people are coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And, but going back to the idea of these far left liberals, I wouldn't endorse what McCarthy did, but I think we need to have a little temperance and understanding of how we feared the communist. That's who I fought against, were the communists, when I served. Mm-hmm. And it was a big deal. And these young people do not understand what the socialism and communism and how long it's been here. I mean, it's been here since before the turn of the last century, not this century, but the last century. Mm-hmm. Socialism and Marxism has been involved in it then. And it's just, they don't understand how they've infiltrated. And I wish young people understood history, and I wish we had not as bad as McCarthyism. I would never promote that kind of, because that was fear and hate mongering, but a little temperance of understanding what the socialist and progressive mindset is, And I think that's what we need in our country, is an understanding of what we were fighting against, and we're still fighting against it. Now, It's wrapped itself up in using pretty names like a psychedelic warrior and stuff, Well, back in the 60s, we had psychedelic warriors, but that was those were usually based out of mushrooms.
Well, let me say that I am actually pretty encouraged about younger people turning more towards conservatism or feeling more open to express their views and get out there. I think there's a lot of reason to be encouraged. In fact, Lauren Boebert is, I don't recall exactly how old she is, but she's a millennial. She falls under the millennial banner, just as an example. Wow. Dan Crenshaw in Texas, he's the millennial. Elise Stefanik out of New York, upstate New York, she is a millennial. So you have some prime examples there in Congress already of millennial conservatives who are taking the reins of the party. And I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism in that regard, especially, the thing for me, though, is that we really have to frame the lessons of this pandemic crisis properly, that it's not an absence of government that has caused people to lose their jobs and face recession and to suffer all of these economic consequences. It is the government and government authority that has brought about these kinds of destructive elements in our daily lives. It is because the government has said, here is our policy, and we're going to force you to close your businesses in order to abide by and fulfill this policy and accomplish whatever goals. So I am worried that there are some people who are going to take the wrong lesson. That's why I think it's up to each of us. It's incumbent upon each of us to say, no, it was actually the government policies that put you out of work, not a failure of the free market or something like that. I look at millennials and I see in 2008, the financial crisis, that's often blamed on the failure of capitalism, a failure of the free markets. Well, really, it was the government. It was the federal government, again, the all-knowing, all-powerful federal government that said you must give these subprime mortgage loans to people who should not actually be getting them. And that really started things that brought about the financial crisis and so forth. And so we had the collapse. It was a result of a failure of government policy, not a failure of the private market. We had a lot of millennials who learned the wrong lessons as they were just getting into the workforce during that time. Now I hope that they don't double down on those lessons and start thinking, really, we do need socialism. We really do need a much more expansive government role. Mm-hmm. And that's upon all of us to do the messaging right.
Absolutely,
What's interesting about 2020 is this is a census year, so it's going to be interesting to see how the districts are going to be realigned throughout the states and throughout the country. Colorado is most likely going to gain a congressman. So it'll be interesting to see how the districts are going to be carved up, and see how conservative or liberal there are. So that's going to be a really interesting thing. And by the way, I submitted my application to be part of that commission on redistricting and reapportionment.
Good for you. No, what's so interesting about this is that this year in Colorado will be the first time, or this post-census period will be the first time that redistricting and reapportionment will be done by separate commissions, as opposed to handled through the legislature and, really, let's be honest, the state Supreme Court that has been so heavily involved. So it will be interesting to see how this actually works out.
Well, here's my prediction. The Democrats are still going to sue, and the state Supreme Court's going to pick their maps. That's just my...
I don't know. I will have to see how this commission works and if that can happen. Right now, I'm erring on the side of the commission, but maybe we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, here's why I believe in that. Because my view is, okay, if the Democrats are for something and so are the Republicans, it means they've already figured an end around it. They figure, okay, if it passes, we'll still get it our way because we'll already have figured out how to screw up the system, take it to the state Supreme Court, and they'll say, well, state Supreme Court is predominantly liberal, and they have been since the 70s, thanks to Governor Lamb and Romer. And that's why Colorado is screwed up is way it is right now.
Yeah, because so I voted for the commissions in, 2018, that election cycle. I voted for them because, I understood that maybe the Democrats have tried to game it out, that it was the best option for Republicans, especially given the trends of the legislature and the way that the Supreme Court has really become, especially, I would say, in the last 10 to 12 years for the Supreme Court. But also, I thought, look, I find it hard to think that some of the smartest Republicans who were on board with Y and Z or whatever the amendments were, that they would get on board with something that could be so easily gamed by the Democrats. There were some people who were behind it that I was like, I feel confident that if you help shape this thing, we're probably in decent hands here. And the Democrats probably can't game it out in a way that is going to be unduly favorable to them. Well, certainly not any better than the way in which things were before.
And I sure hope that I'm wrong and this thing works out and we'll get maps that are at least, brings a balance back in. Because we can't have a state where the one party controls all the different levels, going from governorship all the way down to city council or dog catcher.
That's what I was thinking, dog catcher. Yeah.
City council, that is an area where I think people are now starting to gain more of an interest. I mean, look, I live in Aurora, and Aurora City Council has 3 outright self-described socialists, 3 progressives, and 4 Republicans, and then a mayor who can't vote unless there's a tie. And that socialist group is run by leaders. They are all part of socialist organizations like the Colorado People's Alliance. And tomorrow night, in the Aurora City Council meeting, the expectation is that they are going to be putting forward and passing a $17 an hour minimum wage ordinance. By 2025, it will be $17 an hour, and they're going to be ratcheting up every year starting in 2021 to get to that point. That's going to absolutely decimate the economy of the city of Aurora, especially given that there are so many businesses already struggling to even stay alive right now in this current pandemic economy. And the idea that the that these socialists are going to strangle them even more because they are absolute economic illiterates. They do not understand their ignorance on basic economics. At least I think it's ignorance. Maybe they just don't care because they're simply driven by the socialist ideology. But I tend to believe that socialism is often the root of socialism is often ignorance. The people don't really understand economics, and so they don't care to learn about what economics really are. And so when we look at city councils like Aurora's having an ordinance like this, or you look at Denver, Candy Sengenberger, the socialist communist, Sengenberger, is on the city council in Denver. I think there are a lot of people who come 2021 next fall are going to be looking at these races more closely than ever before, just speaking of city councils. And school boards. I mean, a lot of parents who are ticked off at schools being shut down or going full remote because of these school districts deciding that, nope, we can't have kids in school, even though that's the better learning environment for them.
Oh, we've got a radical that's on is it the state school board, that Trey, whatever his name is?
No, Tay Anderson's on the Denver school board.
Tay Anderson, that's right.
Denver school board.
And he's the one that goes that whenever they want to clear out the homeless camps, he's there to protest along with Cindy and calling the cops MFers and pigs and stuff like that. It just drives me crazy.
I sometimes like to say it's my generation is responsible for all these knotheads we got out there now because, hey, I'm from the 70s, 60s and 70s. I remember the riots and busing, the race riots in Denver when I was young. And, kids were protesting, our parents backed us to protest, we had, and it wasn't just black and white, it's black, brown, and white. Because the back then they called themselves Chicano, the Latinos, they didn't want to go to the black schools or the white schools. They want to stay in their little part of Denver, and we were shipped all over town. But, we started the protest back in the 60s. We started marching anti-war, anti-government, and all of this stuff. And then now we're a bunch of old farts, and we've left it to our kids and grandkids.
And now you're running it.
Yeah, well, it's the young people that's running it now. Yeah, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you seen the two presidential nominees?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to back that up a little bit. Yeah, I
you got to just a little bit, Lloyd, because they're not spring chickens anymore. Although I do have to say, and if we could talk about the presidential race for a bit, I do have to say that the difference between Trump and Biden is so stark. Yesterday, it was just stunning to see all the flubs in one day that Joe Biden kept doing over and over again. He was utterly incoherent. Barack Obama had to announce his name multiple times at their rally together before he finally walked out. I mean, it is the contrast just in terms of how the two act and talk.
That's why I'm running for president, because I figure if Biden can do it and he can't remember.
Lloyd is running for president.
I'm just hoping. I'm just hoping to beat Biden.
Okay, I didn't realize that you were on the ticket.
Yeah,
well, I'm a write-in.
As an in-dem Republican.
Yeah, in-dem Republican. Yeah, I figure.
But isn't it clear though the difference between the two and just how they?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I started this as a joke, because I was looking at all the people the Democrats had running, and I thought they had more than the Republicans did 4 years ago. I'm going, wow, if they can look at the idiots they're putting up there. Hey, I can run too. I'll just, because I just scratch my head at what the Democrats are thinking, because I know what they're thinking. They're going to put, my brother, who now lives in Oklahoma, but was involved in the unions in Colorado for years. He was a union rep up there. He's voting for Kamala Harris. He's not voting for Biden because he says Biden's not going to make it long anyways, and Kamala will be there. And his logic, and this is the logic of some of the Democrats, and I love my brother to death, but some days his logic is he just doesn't want to hear 4 more years of Trump tweets. He says it's not logical, but that's the only reason he's voting for, and he's not voting for Biden, he's voting for Kamala.
Voting for Kamala Harris because he knows that she's going to end up being the next president, probably.
Yeah.
Even before 2024.
Oh, yeah. That's his thinking.
Mm.
You know, I think that's the Democrat thinking all along.
Well, it does seem that way. That could be this 25th Amendment ploy that Pelosi wanted in Congress. Could be simply about getting Biden out if he wins so Kamala Harris can be president.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the whole point of this. You know, they got somebody younger. You know, they still got some doddering old fart to represent the rest of us doddering old farts that might be Democrats and that make the old school happy. And then we got this young progressive or younger progressive that we can throw in there when he falls over or stumbles or trips or whatever, you know.
I'm optimistic about Tuesday, actually, because in terms of the presidential race, because I think people are looking at results more than anything else. Yeah. They're looking at what President Trump has been able to accomplish in terms of his promises, fulfilling countless things. And they recognize, look, this is a guy who is a man of action. He may not have gotten everything. And I may not like everything that he says or tweets. Lord knows I wish he would tweet less a lot of the time. I mean, I'll just be honest. It's true. But if you look at the results and what he's accomplished, I think that drives home the point more than anything else. It's about results, not rhetoric. And I also think that the American people don't want a president of the United States who's willing to lock down the American economy again and to do it by the force of the federal government. I mean, it is not necessary for the government to do that. Look, so I have COVID-19 right now. I got a positive diagnosis or a positive test result on Friday. It's crummy. I am quarantining in my basement bunker, hence being in my studio. I was welcomed by Joe Biden himself into the basement bunker. And I feel crummy. I've got all these, the head cold, and I've got the congestion, and I've had body aches and chills here and there at different points and whatnot, but I'm doing much better now. And most people are getting through this. It is like a nasty flu that if you're responsible, you take care of yourself when you get it, you do your quarantining, you don't put yourself out there at risk of spreading the virus to other people. That's good. That's what you should be doing. But the vast majority of people, and President Trump is proof of this himself, are getting through the virus. And the idea that we should have a federal overlord named Joe Biden crack down on everybody across this country, or even Jared Polis to do that, and everybody in Colorado, to me, seems, especially how we're handling it now and the improvements of medical care and so forth, seems to me to be absolutely outlandish and fundamentally wrong. And also to be instilling fear and panic in people more than there should be.
Yeah, that was one of the complaints that came out, was about, they didn't say, Trump didn't run out and say the sky is falling when this first happened. He was trying to say, hey, this is something bad, but we do not have to, have draconian laws to do this. And I'm like you, I'm very hopeful about Tuesday. I'm seeing polls that are starting to, and the polls, to be honest with you, I quit answering them. I'll say right now, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, and in spite of this joke here, I will be casting my vote for Donald Trump, and proud to do it. And I can say that at least in my sons will also, and daughter-in-laws will also be casting their vote. So, and I think this is the first year my grandson gets to vote, and or this one, anyways. It's his first year to vote, and he's going to be doing the same thing. So I'm 3 generations of the Mendenhalls will be voting for Donald Trump. So.
Oh, and what's driving the fear of this virus is the media. They make it sound like it's the Black Death of the Middle Ages that wiped out a third of Europe. And it's nothing like that. It's just a real nasty flu bug. And if you don't have comorbidity, you're going to get out. You're going to get through this. Yeah, you'll feel like crud, but you'll survive. You know, unfortunately, I have type A blood type, which means that COVID really likes type A blood for some reason.
Hmm.
And I also have respiratory issues, so I've got to be really careful. I wear a mask at work. Well, everybody at work wears a mask. And I wear a mask when I go shopping. So, but I'm not going to act like, oh, the sky is falling and I'm going to keep myself away from other people. I'm just going to be smart about it and
You have to live your life still.
yeah, live
And
my
that's
life.
that's what it is. You have to live your life. You can't simply be cowering in fear. However, I will say there are some the symptoms that you get. It's more than just a flu. In my case, it feels basically just like flu symptoms and so forth. But I think there are a lot of people who it is worse in some cases, especially those who have the comorbidity situation, and those are the ones that may end up hospitalized and may end up dying. So it is deadly. I mean, we've had nearly well over 200,000 Americans who have died because of this virus. So it's a serious thing.
Yes,
But at the same time, we can't just force everybody just to stay in your bunkers if you don't have the virus and to be simply doing remote learning and living off of the government's, benevolence by providing you with things. You can't do that. You can't. It's not in America.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
My kids, because my wife's health, both of us have health issues, and it's been a practice for years because, especially with my wife's health, that our kids don't come around when they have colds. When they've got it. We've taken these kind of precautions for the last 10, 15 years. This is common sense precautions. When you've got the elderly that are, and I'm amongst the elderly now, you don't go around people when you're, don't spread your germs, or if you do, stay a distance away, and we stayed locked up for about the first 2 weeks because it's just wanted to take, because one son's a police officer, another daughter-in-law is an RN, so they're on the front line of this stuff in the beginning, and then it got to the point I looked, this isn't working. I've still got to get out and go shop. I can wash my hands. I put on a mask whenever I go in. And it's probably a practice I may continue simply because of my own health and my wife's health. I just don't want to spread, bring in anything. And I don't know that the masks are working. I know now they're requiring nurses, at least in the Indian Healthcare Service, they're requiring them to wear an N95 mask with a cloth mask over the top, or a disposable mask, so they can throw it out when they get through just going in and out of rooms. They still have their N95. So, but when they get home, I went over and saw my daughter-in-law last week, and she double masked. I had a mask on. We were good. We stood outside and visited because I was taking her birthday present. But that's common sense. That's all we have to do is use some common sense, not cower in a dungeon somewhere.
Sure. Well, and I think also in terms of the likelihood of President Trump performing very well, if you look at the polling data, to the extent we want to believe polling data, of Hispanics and of the Black community, and you see that President Trump has made remarkable gains in those communities, and I think it's because they're looking at results, number one, of his administration. Number two, they're looking finally at the results of decades of Democrat policies when it comes to the welfare state and so forth. And they're also looking at the Democrats and the hollowness that they are in terms of their outreach to those communities, that they basically the Democrats think they have a monopoly. They take them for granted. They don't even try to court those votes because they're like, oh, of course, they're going to be ours no matter what. It goes to Joe Biden's absolute arrogance when he said, you ain't black if you don't vote for him. And I think there are a lot who are looking at it and saying, look, results of Trump, results of the Democrats, and this arrogance of the Democrats are really pushing me towards Donald Trump. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the polling data. We're seeing the black rappers that are coming out publicly showing support behind President Trump. And Trump is somebody who's even willing to listen and engage and have conversations on issues of what's going on in the Black community, which is why he has his platinum plan that he's put out. The platinum plan is this plan that the president would like to see move forward in terms of helping the Black community in a number of different areas. So he's actually having these conversations. And that is like, wow, you're actually engaging as opposed to simply taking us for granted or writing us off in the case of a Republican who normally would just write off the Black community. I remember talking with some folks who were saying that when the Romney campaign in 2012 was campaigning in Colorado, they basically didn't respond or interact with those minority communities. They just wrote them off, just presuming that they were Democrat. Why in the world would you do that? And not at least try to stake claim to the idea that you want to engage. At least give it a go, and that's where Trump is excelling, I think.
Now, speaking of the results, a little over a year ago, I predicted that state governments were going to do something detrimental to their own states to drive down their economies in hopes of getting Trump out of power. And lo and behold, a few months later, we've got this virus. And that's what they did, is they went in and they closed down their states, and they ruined a lot of people's lives because within a month, those businesses, they're gone. They're not coming back, especially restaurants, bars. I've got friends that own comedy clubs that may not survive coming next year because that's how bad they were hurting. And my prediction came true that they were going to do something to screw their own economies to try to drive down this juggernaut that Trump got going, that was not only helping the whites, but everybody was prospering.
Well,
so
actually,
they had to do something to drive that down.
So, Art, if I could say two things. One, in terms of everybody prospering, the bottom quartile of income earners, finally, the end of last year and beginning of this year, finally, we're seeing the greatest income gains. The bottom quartile, that is tremendous, and that was in the Trump economy. However, the one point where I would quibble with you is I don't think that there's any sort of like grand Democratic strategy, let's tank our state economies for the purpose of getting rid of President Trump. I think they have a lot of misguided ideas as far as addressing the virus, as far as government control. I certainly believe they like to expand government authority over our lives any chance that they can. But I don't think that they decided, hey, let's go ahead and take an opportunity here to just intentionally tank our economies and then get President Trump out of office, because they have to know as well that it's going to take a while for a lot of these economies and these businesses to resuscitate, to come back. And so it could come back to bite the Democrats if these economies take a long time to recover.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen, because a lot of these restaurant owners and bar owners who voted Democrat last time, they're all saying we're going to vote Republican this time of year. So
right.
I think the way that these state governments and cities that lock down, they're going to face a huge backlash this time around. And I think Trump's going to win all the states that he won last time, and he may even win a few more states on top of that, because the thing that sealed it, especially Pennsylvania, when Biden said he was going to get rid of fossil fuels. And I think that stuck a knife or a fork into his campaign.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that in terms of fracking and the Democrat view on that, that is, without a doubt, hurting Joe Biden's candidacy, especially in a state like Pennsylvania. And I hope a state like Colorado, too, because there are tens of thousands of people who work in oil and gas in Colorado who are already being hit hard by the Democrats because of the green little deal on the plat that I call Jared Polis and the Democrats' approach to energy in this state. I think they're already fed up with that. And then you add Joe Biden into the mix saying, we're going to end oil and gas altogether eventually. It's not like we're going to do it overnight, but eventually it's going to happen. You add all that together, and I think there are a lot of people who are saying, well, no thanks. No thanks.
Yeah. In Oklahoma,
what are your thoughts on this dethroned Polis movement?
Well, first, Lloyd, you were going to say something I heard?
Well, I was just going to say about the oil industry. Oklahoma used to be the oil capital of the world, and we really were that because this is where all the major oil companies back before it stopped in about the early 80s when we had that first big, when the oil industry just kind of bottomed out in the early 80s, we had that big recession. And, but, you know, Oklahoma did make the transition over into telecommunications and in the aerospace industry. But you start cutting back on fuels and stuff, that's going to hurt the aerospace industry as well because, you know, hey, we've got airlines now, they're just almost giving away their tickets just to get people to fly. I mean,
it's true.
And look how bad how they were giving away literally oil. They were paying people to take oil off their hands at one point when, you know, minus $6 a gallon or something, or $6 a barrel, you know, for oil back when this all first started hitting at the same time, you know, and we've still got, our gas is still only $1.67 a gallon here in Muskogee.
Wow. So, Art, you asked about dethroned Polis. So I have a still in flux, still to be determined view. So my view overall has been that I think the timing is off. I think we need to be focused. Republicans, conservatives in Colorado have needed to be focused on re-electing Cory Gardner, trying to make gains in the state legislature. And I have worried that the dethroned Polis effort has distracted some resources and time from that effort that we otherwise would need. That's been my concern about the timing of it. I also have been concerned about whether or not it's viable in some respects. Doing a recall of a governor has never happened, at least not in Colorado's history. We have recalled, you know, several years back. It's been a while now, though. We did recall a few state legislators. There have been other instances here and there, school boards and what have you, where we have seen recalls that have been successful, but they've been much smaller scale. So it's a big undertaking. So you put the timing of it up against that sort of undertaking. And I've been opposed to it strategically in terms of what's happening now. However, I think Jared Polis has vastly overextended his hand. I think he fancies himself King Jared and that he has assumed all of this authority in a way that crosses the line time after time. He thinks that he deserves these kinds of powers and that he knows better than the rest of us. And I think that that sort of arrogant attitude and condescending attitude, like wear your damn mask, that kind of attitude to me is unbecoming of a leader. The way that he has talked about people who he views as beneath him are unbecoming of a leader. And he has assumed this authority that goes well beyond what the Constitution authorizes him. Unfortunately, the state legislature has been unwilling to do anything to rein him in, even when they had a chance earlier this year. So that means that I am deeply sympathetic to the idea of dethroned Polis. And I think that word is exactly right. I mean, I said back in, was it May or June, when the legislature was coming back into session, and I wrote my weekly column for Colorado Politics, I said, let the revolution begin. Because we needed to have, and that was in the legislature, in terms of the legislature revolting just to affirm its position in the three branches of government that we have in Colorado. The legislative branch needs to reassert its role in the separation of powers. But so I am very sympathetic to the idea, and it is possible. I haven't signed it yet. I'm wrestling a little bit back and forth with some internal logic in terms of endorsing the strategy and so forth, but it is possible I will end up signing the petition after Tuesday. I just haven't reached a final conclusion on that yet. I think strategically, I'm not sure that the strategy is right. I think it's been a distraction from where the resources really need to be overall. That's my sort of complex, more nuanced view.
I think the reason why the legislature didn't come back is, Well, it's run by Democrats,
Well,
and they
yes.
all agree with
That's true.
Polis. So they figure, well, why come back? We agree with what he's doing.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and then they
that's
also get to
what's-
pass the buck. That's what's the case for so many of these legislators is it's just like, let's give the president this authority or the governor this authority, and then we'll just complain when we don't like what they do. But we don't want to actually be put on the spot to make a decision on whether or not we should do that. No, I just want to complain because Trump did this or Polis did that.
Okay. Okay, so what are your predictions on the House races and the Senate races here in Colorado? Do you think we'll take back one of the chambers, or if we're really lucky, we take back both the chambers and really slow things down to Polis, or is it going to be status quo?
Well, I don't think we will take back either the state house or the state senate. I do think it is possible to secure 1 or 2 seats in the state senate and 1 to 3 seats in the state house. I can't identify which ones those would be, but I think that's possible. That would be, to me, the best case scenario.
Yeah.
I just think legislatively, it's a very tough call right now for Republicans in Colorado.
And I think it all hinges on the outcome of the commission on the redistricting and reapportionment, and hopefully we get maps that are a little more equitable than last time around. 10 years ago when the new maps came out in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I agree with you. That's going to be important. I also think Cory Gardner's race is critical for 2022.
Yes.
And the reason why Gardner's race is critical for 2022 is because if he goes down, if he loses, and we don't hold that seat, then we essentially will not have a statewide elected Republican in 2022. And that will make it much more difficult for us to defeat the governor, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Treasurer. Those statewide races will be harder for Republicans to pick up if we don't have Cory Gardner as the incumbent. It's just a reality.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with you there. What say you, Lloyd?
Well, yeah. From Oklahoma's point of view, I mean, we're red. We're going to stay that way. We've got one congressperson down in southeastern Oklahoma who is a Democrat. She's already been put on notice. She's not going to win. Nationally, we're going to have all of our representatives will be Republican, both our senators, and unless something just really crazy happens. And right now, it's not that way. But as far as like getting rid of your governor, you're right. The focus needs to be on putting a balance of power across the 3 branches of government, and that's what we have to do. We as Republicans had the chance when Trump was first elected. We had that. But we weren't prepared for it. That was what the problem was. I think we're nationally now we're more prepared to understand what we've got to do if we have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and the 3 branches. The same has to be for Colorado. You have to lay the groundwork for that, because Oklahoma, when I moved here back in the 80s, after I got out of the service, this was a Democrat control. I actually registered as a Democrat so I could vote in the primaries. We had no Republicans running here.
Really?
Yeah. And up until Hillary ran against Obama, I will say this, I voted for Hillary in the primaries. That was the last time I ever voted on a Democratic ticket. I've always been a conservative. I've always been a Republican, but in order to vote in a primary here in Oklahoma, everybody was a Democrat here, and that's how if you want to vote in the primary, you had to register that way, because we just didn't have anybody running. And in that amount of time, we've switched back to, we're a very conservative state now.
Mm-hmm.
So
hopefully Colorado could do that too.
Yeah.
We laid the groundwork for it.
So what are your thoughts on the House Pro race and the Perlmutter Stockham race?
I think that Republicans will have a very difficult time to beat Perlmutter or Crow. in the 7th and 6th, respectively. I think Steve House and Casper Stockham certainly bring a lot to the table. I have been intrigued by Steve House's policy-focused campaign, especially on healthcare. And that's where, look, reality is Ed Perlmutter is definitely going to win. Steve House could bring it to Jason Crow. I think it's going to be very tough. But one of the reasons why I think Steve House has a better shot than Casper Stockham does in their races is that I think Steve's bringing a healthcare perspective and talking about healthcare and having a specific healthcare plan appeals to a lot of people who are concerned about healthcare right now, especially amidst COVID-19 and everything else. I think that certainly can help him. And Jason Crow also, Crow prosecuted President Trump in that impeachment. And I don't think that was helpful for him. I think people remember that, and they don't like him wasting time on a frivolous impeachment proceeding. And so that hurts Jason Crow as well. And Jason Crow has got to go. It's possible there. I just think Perlmutter is deeply entrenched, and I couldn't see a Republican beating him in any circumstance.
I agree with you. Hey, Jimmy, thank you. You were a trooper. You made it all the way through the show, and I'm happy you made it. And I want to thank you for coming on the show. And be well, my friend, and get through this, and hopefully we'll have you on down the road.
Well, I appreciate it, Art. Lloyd, it was great to make your acquaintance and have our conversation today. And if I may, I would like to put in a little bit of a plug. You can see Jimmy at the Crossroads behind me. That's my own web show that I do in partnership with the Washington Examiner. You can subscribe on my channel at youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. I have known Art for a lot of years. I was at when he ran for State House of Representative a number of years ago. I was at Senor Rick's for that kickoff party. I absolutely remember that. And my earliest memory of you, Art, was actually with you and your skateboard at a rally at the state capitol in 2010 or so. That's the most distinct memory that I have. So it's such a pleasure to know you, my friend, and thanks for the opportunity to come on today.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure meeting you as well. And I will be subscribing to your channel because I like the way you think, young man.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You as well. And vote.
Oh,
yes, absolutely.
That's right. Vote, everybody. Well, Lloyd, another great show in the can.
Fantastic show.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we'd had a bigger crowd. But,
it's right after a holiday. We had Halloween last night, and I think people were coming down from their sugar buzz.
Sugar highs, that's it. You know,
their time changed, too.
Oh, the time change screws me up every time.
Yeah.
I just,
All right, folks. All of you in the chat, thank you for coming to the show. You all have a great Sunday. God bless you, and see you next time, man. And what do you always say, Lloyd?
Be kind, treat each other better than you treat yourself. All lives matter, including the unborn, and God bless the USA. I'm the Grumpy Vlogger with Art, and I'm out of here.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.